All right, so welcome to the Skydy 5 Sunbreak Sword and Shield tier list, where I will be ranking all 64 Rarity 10 Sword and Shields in the game. Now, before I begin, I want to go over three things. So firstly, the way I'll be ranking these Sword and Shields is by their power, their versatility, and their comfortability. And those properties are based on each weapon's stats and not how cool the sword and shield looks or anything like that. That is a completely subjective thing and a completely different tier list. I just want to keep it based on the stats of each weapon. That's how I'll be ranking them. How they look doesn't really matter because you can layer them anyways. So that's how this ranking will go down. Secondly, even still, this tier list will still be a little bit subjective, even if it's based on stats and not how it looks. So most likely there may be a few sword and shields that can maybe go up a tier or go down a tier, but generally you're probably not going to agree with everything on this list, and that's completely fine. Feel free to discuss in the comments, or if you're in a live chat, you can discuss it there. Third thing, this is a kind of a hard tier list to make, simply because it's a most of these sword and shields are pretty well balanced. So even if I rank something in like the C tier or B tier, those can still be very powerful in the end game as well. Even in like late anomaly grind, like if you're like AR 241 and beyond, right? So most of these weapons are still very powerful and very viable at the end game. I'd say like the D tier and F tier weapons are probably like a very poor choice. And we'll talk about why once I rank those sword and shields. But yeah, that's how it'll go. You're gonna do lance, or am I just gonna apply the info here to every melee weapon because it would probably apply. So lance, every weapon I think has like a unique playstyle. I mean, I'm not really sure. I've been trying to get into other weapons recently because I feel like I've just been like stuck in sword and shield, because this is a sword and shield channel after all. I'm not really sure. I know lance would wants guard and embolden and offensive guard and all that stuff. But their playstyles are definitely very different. Will Wild Heart's SnS be included? No, because there are no sword and shields in Wild Hearts. Okay, so why don't we begin? The way I'm going to order these sword and shields is by their elements or status category. So I'm going to start with all the raw sword and shields, and then I'll move on to fire, and then I'll go through all the other elements, and then I'll start going through all the statuses. So if there's a sword and shield you want to request first, maybe it's like a status sword and shield and you can't be here till the end, because this is probably going to be a longer stream. Feel free to request it and I'll talk about it and rank it. But otherwise, I'm just going to go in order. So starting with raw, we have the Fine Kimura Sword. One thing I want to mention is that the average attack stats amongst all the Rarity 10 Sword and Shields is 300. It's about 330, and the mean affinity is like 5%, but that's because of it's like an sort of like skewed because of the Ninja Master Sword. So really, it's about like 2 to 3%. but really the median affinity is 0%. This is a very average Sword and Shield stat-wise, but I think average in this game is like really good. So 330 attack and 0% affinity is like pretty standard, and that's like what makes a good Sword and Shield. Along with like purple sharpness, that also helps a lot. The one thing that really stands out with this weapon is its slots. A 4-2 slot is very good, and level 4 slots are very valuable at the very end of your anomaly research grind. Once you start unlocking like the attack boost level 4 decorations and the expert level 4 decorations, that's when these level 4 decorations become really, really valuable. That's very good to have here. These are very good decorations, or very good slots, rather. Same with the Rampage slots. Level 2 Rampage slot means you can use anti-species decorations. So yeah, very good. 5% damage increase for raw sword and shields. Yeah, so that's. I'm gonna rank it an A tier. The reason why it's not an S tier is simply because it has no element, and in this game in particular, because of the way they balance these sword and shields, there's just no benefit of having no element. Right. I think there are two other sword and shields I can think of that sort of obsoletes this weapon. And again, we'll talk about that. But you know, there's just no benefit of having no elements or status in particular. So really, there's going to be no raw sword and shield that's going to be an S tier because of that. It really helps to have some kind of element or status. That just makes this weapon stronger. So Fine Kumura Sword, I think it's a very great sword and shield. I just don't think it's S tier in particular. S tier is just are like the sword and shields that really stick out. Just like they're like almost flawless sword and shields. That's what I would think as in like an S tier sword and shield. All right, that's the Fine Kumura Sword. The next raw sword and shield we have is the Avidia Edge. So we have the Nagakuga Sword and Shield. So the main problem with this weapon is its low attack stat. So 300 attack is, I think, tied for the second lowest. I think the lowest is 290, and that's the Shaguru Magala Sword and Shield. So even this weapon, the Nagakuga Sword and Shield, has purple sharpness and 30% affinity. I think the low raw really hurts this weapon a lot. It makes this weapon a little bit weak. It does have one level 2 slots, though, which is nice, I guess. Another thing that kind of hurts this weapon a little bit is its Rampage slot. So the Nagakuga Sword and Shield only has a level 1 Rampage slot. It used to be that level 1 Rampage slots were complete garbage. Because there were just no good level 1 Rampage decorations. I think Title Update 5 added Wirebug Wrangler, and that one's actually okay and very comfortable because every Wirebug you pick up on the field lasts 30 seconds longer. So very nice for spamming more Soakbind attacks like Windmill, Meiji Shorigeki, and Soakbind Shield Bash attack. But you don't get the option for the anti-species decorations, and that kind of hurts that a little bit, having a level 1 Rampage slot. So this isn't like a horrible sword and shield. I want to put it in D or F. I'd say like D and F are like pretty poor choices, but it's not like that great either. So that's why it's going in C tier. Okay, so the next sword and shield, which it kind of scares me a little bit. It'd be the Heavenly Kingsword. We have the Bishaten Sword and Shield. So the Bishaten Sword and Shield has 340 raw, so it's higher than the Fine Kumura Sword and Shield. It doesn't have a lot of purple sharpness out of the box. It only has like 10 units of purple sharpness. Plus, its slots are just slightly worse. It's a 3-1 slot compared to Fine Kumura Sword's 4-2. But it does have an extra 10 raw on the top of Fine Kumura Sword. I'm really kind of torn on this. I feel like this isn't. I'd rather use the Kumura Sword and Shield, but I don't think this Sword and Shield is that bad, especially once you can unlock all the anomaly slots on this thing. Of course, unlocking all the anomaly slots will increase its sharpness by 20, so then you get 30 units of purple, and that helps us a lot. I don't think it's... I used to have this on B tier, but I think I'm gonna put it up on A tier. I think the Kumura Sword is better, but I do think the Bishaten Sword and Shield is pretty powerful. Well, not as comfortable because it doesn't have as much purple sharpness, but once you can start unlocking all the anomaly slots, this wouldn't be too bad. You would just use Destroyer Oil a little bit more frequently. So Bishaten Sword and Shield, I'll have it on A tier. Okay, so the next raw Sword and Shield is... let me look at my list. The Garen Golem Sword and Shield. So this is our first case of D tier. The main reason is because it has blue sharpness. Blue sharpness in Master Rank is terrible. I believe I talked about that in the Ninja Master Sword video. Right, so blue sharpness has a raw modifier of 1.2, whereas purple sharpness has a raw modifier of 1.39. So purple sharpness is like almost 16% stronger than blue sharpness. So even if the Garen Golem Sword and Shield has a high raw attack stat of 360, the blue sharpness really kills this because of the modifiers, right? So even if you try to, putting a bunch of attack boosts, it just won't scale as much as white sharpness or purple sharpness, right? It's like, think of like slope of a line, right? It's like kind of like that. So blue sharpness is just terrible in Master Rank when all the other Sword and Shields come with at least some whites or some purple. So the Garen Golem Sword and Shield, that's a pretty obvious D tier. I don't recommend anyone using the Sword and Shield at all, really, because of that. Next up, we have the Great Tigeric Sword Plus. So this I'm going to put on B tier. It does have a pretty high attack stat of 360 and purple sharpness. It's like 20 units of purple sharpness. The thing that kind of hurts is the negative 15% affinity and no slots. So negative 15% affinity means you're going to need more armor skills to bring this up to 100% affinity. And having 100% affinity is very beneficial, I think, because, crit boost becomes more effective, and then Master's Touch also becomes more effective. Having more crits is good. Having 100% affinity is very good. And with negative affinity weapons, it's pretty hard. Right? Even with like full Agitator, full Weakness Exploit, full Crit Eye, you only get up to like 90%. And then you have to start using like Bloodlust, which I think Bloodlust is an overrated skill, to be honest. I don't think it's very worth it. And it doesn't help that this weapon has no slots either. It does have a level 2 Rampage slot, so it can be pretty strong. And I think this weapon has a lot of damage potential. it can probably do more damage than the 2 and 8 tier, but it's just not as comfortable, not as versatile, right? So, but because it has a very high damage potential, I'm putting it in B tier. Next up, we have Elite Dagger. So Elite Dagger is the Jaggy and Jaggiatry Sword and Shield. It would be this guy. This one's kind of awkward. 350 attack and white sharpness. It does have potential to go to purple, but you're gonna have to start using Candycraft or slotting in the sharpness boost when curious crafting. It has 2 level 1 slots, but for raw sword and shields in particular, it's very beneficial to have level 2 or higher. Right, level 1 slots are okay, but you really want level 2 and level 3, level 4 slots on raw sword and shields in particular. This weapon's not that great, but it's not terrible either. I think this will go in B tier. I think it's where I have it. Yeah. It's not too bad. Just a few things kind of hurt it a little bit. I think there is like a weapon that sort of obsoletes this guy though. And we'll talk about that later. Okay. The next raw sword and shield is the Bone Tree Sword and Shield, which I don't feel like pronouncing. It's this guy here. I don't think this weapon's that great. It does have 360 raw and a little bit of white sharpness, but no slots, and a level 1 rampage slot kind of sort of kills any damage potential compared to the Great Tigrex Sword Plus. So I don't think this is a great choice. I'm going to put it in C tier though, because I don't think it's as bad as blue sharpness weapons. At least it has white sharpness. It's not a lot, but it has white sharpness. Now we have the Bone 2 tree, which is called the Bone Breaker Tabar Plus. So it's this guy. So likewise, negative affinity kind of hurts this weapon a bunch. Right, this weapon does have 370 attack and white sharpness. Negative 25 affinity really blows though. And it only has a level 2 rampage slot, so you can't even use Kushala Dora's soul, the rampage decoration there. But it does have big damage potential if you can overcome that negative affinity a bunch. So again, it's not going to be as terrible as the Garagum Sword and Shield, but I just don't find it very comfortable or very versatile, in my opinion. So this goes into C tier. I'd say if you want a negative affinity weapon, the Great Tigrex Sword is probably going to be your best one overall. Next up we have Feral Fangs. So this is Seregios. It's not bad, but has no level 2 slots, which is sort of the killer and why this isn't an A tier. I feel like if it had a level 2 slot, it would be like A tier for sure, but fortunately it doesn't. Everything else is pretty good though. 330 attack, which as I mentioned is pretty good. Purple sharpness, 10% affinity, also solid as well. This could be like A tier, maybe, depending on who you talk to. For me though, I'm putting this on B tier. I kind of wish they brought the old mechanic where you roll 5 times, you restore some sharpness. That would have been a neat thing about this weapon. If that was the case, then maybe this would be A tier, but I just have to put it on B tier. Okay, next up we have Barrel Sword and Shield, Pneumatic Drill Blade. Again, it's a negative affinity weapon. It does come with a lot of white sharpness, but I just don't really find negative affinity weapons very beneficial. Even though their damage potential is great, it's just you have to overcome it. You have to bring like a Feather Palgo, or you have to bring Bloodlust, and it's really doesn't make this a comfortable weapon or a very versatile weapon because of that. So I'm putting this along with the Bonebreaker Tabar C tier. Again, if you want a negative affinity weapon, I think the Great Tigric Sword is going to be the best one. Next up, we have Barbarian Terror. This is the Diablo Sword and Shield. This one's pretty easy. Blue Sharpness weapon, a D tier. Same with Garangon's Sword and Shield. This does have the highest attack set at 380, but again, the blue sharpness really kills this. It also just has negative 5% affinity, no slots, level 1 rampage slot. This is almost like an F tier weapon, to be honest, but I think there's a worse Sword and Shield that goes here. And you can probably guess what that is. We're actually going to get there in a minute. So the next one is Blower Scythe. Yeah. Izuchi Sword and Shield. This one's actually kind of awkward. So I have it at B tier. It has 330 attack, 15% affinity, a level 3, level 2 slots, a level 2 rampage slots. That's all really good. Its sharpness is very awkward because, right, you know, you slot in one level of handicraft and you get purple sharpness. This one's really tricky to slot in. I have it at B tier right now. Honestly, it could be A tier. Especially if you unlock all the anomaly slots. Surprisingly, it could be A tier. I respectfully disagree with this placement of which weapon. Yeah. I don't know. I think I might just bump this up to A tier. Now that I think about it. You guys can discuss it in the chat. But I'm gonna put this in A tier. Okay. We have a few more raw sword and shields left. Actually, we have 2 more raw sword and shields left. Next one we have is the Ninja Master Sword. And of course, it's going into F tier. Obviously. I already made a 11-minute video on the Ninja Master Sword. It is going to be the worst sword and shield in the game by far. Purple sharpness. Sorry, not purple sharpness, blue sharpness. I'm getting my sharpness colors mixed up. Blue sharpness, so this is already a dead weapon. But its attack set is significantly low, right? 300, again, that's second, it's tied for second lowest. So even if this weapon has 100% affinity, this is just such a weak weapon. It's sort of unbelievable why people think this is a very like comfortable weapon, because it's not. You're like purposely gimping yourself of so much damage that you get from other weapons. Even like the D tier weapons will probably outdamage the Ninja Master Sword, even though the Ninja Master Sword comes with base 100% affinity. So it's just sort of like unbelievable, even when I made the Truth of Ninja Master Sword video, that people will still think it's a comfortable weapon when it's really not. You know, you're prolonging the hunt, so you're letting the monster attack you more, and therefore you're putting yourself in danger because the hunt's lasting longer, when you can just be using a stronger sword and shield, right? This is, yeah, the 100% affinity and the long blue sharpness I think really fooled people into thinking that this is a good weapon. Um, that's kind of the same case with the base game too, with the high ninja sword. Um, but in Master Rank in Sunbreak, this weapon is just complete garbage. Now, if you like the look of this weapon, of course you can layer it. Blah blah blah. Uh, then it would be like higher. I personally don't really like this design, but um, you can of course layer it if you really enjoy it. So yeah, please don't use this weapon ever. This is probably like the worst weapon in the entire game, honestly. Not just Sword and Shield, just the worst weapon out of everything in this game. Right, and last up, for Raw Sword and Shield, we have the Royal Order Sword and Shield. I'm gonna put this in so not S tier, A tier. It's 320 raw, which is sort of on the lower ends for raw sword and shields, but has a decent chunk of purple. Has how much affinity? 10% affinity, level 2 slots, and a level 2 rampage slot. So while it's not going to be the strongest, this is pretty comfortable. Probably the most comfortable of all the raw sword and shields, to be honest. And that's kind of why it's an A tier. It's just a solid sword and shield overall. Alright, so I believe that is all the raw sword and shields. Maybe I missed something, but I don't think I did. So we're moving on to fire. Okay, so the first fire sword and shield would be Violet Mizutsune sword and shield. Violet Mizutsune sword and shield has an attack stat of 320, 10% affinity, big chunk of purple. But the best thing about this weapon is its slots. It has 3 level 2 slots, which is very good. It's not the best, but it's still very good. The thing that kind of hurts this is its low fire element. It only has 20 fire. So it's kind of hard to justify using this as a purely elemental sword and shield. It's also hard to justify using it as a purely raw sword and shield because of the way unlocking anomaly slots work. Right? If your sword and shield has an element, then you sort of unlocking some of the slots will increase both attack and element. Whereas if the sword and shield is raw or status, it will just keep increasing the attack. So it's whenever they released that mechanic, it kind of made these sort of weapons awkward. But it's still solid, I'd say. Even if because of that, and even if the rampage slot is only level 1, level 1 rampage slots aren't too bad now because of Widebug Wrangler. So I put this in A tier just because of its versatility with the slots and its sharpness. Next up, we have Inspirited Ifrits. So this is the Rathalos Sword and Shield. Yes. I'm gonna put this in B tier. It does have a pretty high attack set of 330 and 47 fire. The thing that kind of kills this is no slots. Even for Elemental Sword and Shield, having a slot is like very good. Any kind of slot, because you can slot in your element to tech up decorations and that stuff. Having no slots kind of suck. This probably could go up to A tier, honestly, because of how powerful it could potentially be, but because of it's not as comfortable, it's not as versatile when you make your builds and stuff like that. So B tier it is. Next we have Platinum Dawn, and this is probably a little bit controversial, but I'm going to put this in A tier. Right, compared to the Rathalos Sword and Shield, it does have a lot lower attack stat of 310 and a bit lower fire of 42. But it does have a level 3 slot. And it has a decent chunk of white. And it has 35% base affinity, so don't have to invest in any critical eye. Right, just Agitator, Weakness Exploit will put it up to 100%. And I think this is a lot more comfortable to use compared to the Rathalos Sword and Shield. The Silver Rathalos Sword and Shield. Very nice to use as far as Fire Sword and Shields go. However, I don't think this is the best Fire Sword and Shield. We'll get to that. Next two. Next is the Espionage Sword and Shield. And this one is going into B tier as well. Kind of the same deal as the Rathalos Sword and Shield, it just has no slots. Also, this weapon has like a low fire stat, so it's kind of like not really recommended. I wouldn't really recommend using this at all. But it is kind of strong and has a base 20% affinity, which is nice. But I don't think this is as good as the Flaming Espionage Sword and Shield, which will be our first S tier Sword and Shield. So I talked about this Sword and Shield in the Elemental Sword and Shield guide for Sunbreak, and this thing just blows everything out of the water. Even though its attack stat's low at 310, just everything else is very good, right? Purple Sharpness, 40 Fire, 50% Affinity, very good slots. It's 411, level 3 Rampage slots. So, but the big thing is it deals poison damage as well, right? A hidden 33 poison, which is right, very, very solid. I mean, this thing's just gonna melt everything. I just don't think you can, like any other Fire Sword and Shield sort of matches the damage potential of this guy. Right, it's just an absolutely monster of a Sword and Shield. And that's why I'm putting this in S tier. Right, there's really nothing wrong with this guy. Also, according to the last presentation, this is the most popular Sword and Shield in Sunbreak, which is kind of a surprise to me. Thank goodness it wasn't the Ninja Master Sword, at the very least. Right. We do have a few more Fire Sword and Shields, but these are all kind of duds. So I'm just going to go through them kind of quickly. Anjanath, Sword and Shield, B tier. Kind of the same problem with like the Bonebreaker Tabar and the Pneumatic Drill Blade. Negative affinity is not that great, especially with like Elemental Sword and Shields, because you can start using like crit element and stuff like that, which you need to crit. But it does have like big damage potential. I just don't find it to be very comfortable and very versatile at all. But it's still very strong, and I'd say it's in B tier. It's better than these, the Bonebreaker Tabar and a Pneumatic Drill Blade, simply because this guy has an element. So that's why it's in B tier. And then the next one we have the Uroktor Sword and Shield, the Bruising Beak. Where is it? This guy. It's also going on B tier. Actually, I mean, the Sword and Shield isn't too bad. It doesn't have a decent attack stat of 340. A nice chunk of white sharpness, 32 fire, decent slots, 211, level 2 rampage slots. I mean, this could kind of swing in the A or B for me. Like, it's pretty decent, I'd say, but I'm gonna stick it in B tier. And then I think the last Fire Sword and Shield, yep, is Secta Tray Red, the Panahabra Sword and Shield, the red color. It's also going on B tier. I think the nice thing about this weapon is its slots. Right, it's a 4-2-1 slot with level 3 rampage slot, so this is a very versatile weapon. But it's just not going to be as strong or as powerful as any of the others, really. Right, if you want to like maybe make like a guard elemental sword and shield, kind of a weird combo, but you could use this one because of its good slots. Really, though, the only fire sword and shield you should use is Flaming Espinoses because it's just so powerful. That's all of the fire sword and shields. Next we have the next element is water. Starting with Mizuzune sword and shield. Okay, so in my elemental sword and shield video, this is one of the water sword and shields I recommended. It is pretty solid, right? So 320 attack, 36 water, 15% affinity. Sort of just solid stats. It's not going to deal the most water damage, but it is still decently powerful, mainly because of the purple sharpness. Its slots could be a little better, right? It just only has one level 1 slots, which is better than nothing. You can at least slot in like water attack or I don't remember Kushala's Blessing, which increases your water attack as well. This is a solid pick for water elemental sword and shield playstyle. Next one we have Royal Waterclaw Plus. This is another weapon I recommended in my elemental sword and shield video. And this was actually my pick as well. So 330 attack, solid, big chunk of white, 51 water, very good slots as well. So it's a 3-1-1. Right, you can fit in a lot of water attack and Kushala's Blessing decorations, as well as a level 3 rampage slot. So you have an option for Elembane decoration, but honestly I think anti-species decoration is going to be a little bit better overall. The other sword and shield I recommended in that video was Agamemnon. This is the water tree sword and shield. So 320 attack, has a lot of water damage, so it's 67 water. However, its slots are worse compared to the Royal Waterclaw Plus, as well as its sharpness is a little bit worse. Yeah, this will deal the most water damage between all the water sword and shields. So really, these 3 water sword and shields are good. The reason why none of these are S tier is simply because there's just something sort of wrong with each one of them. Not like objective. One's not objectively like better than the other. Is sort of my issue. As why is the Waterclaw Plus not S tier? Well, I just don't think it's like as stand out. It doesn't stand out between the other 3. These 3 sort of just deal like similar damage, really. Well, according to my rough calculations that I sort of did before making that Element Sword and Shield guide, which is why none of these are S tier. But yeah, there are other water sword and shields we have here. We have the Tetranodon sword and shield, which I'll put in B tier. It's not gonna deal a lot of water damage, water element damage, just 23 water. Has a level 4 decoration, 340 attack, white sharpness. You can potentially get it to purple sharpness with like some handicraft, but I just don't think this is as great an option anymore compared to the 3 and 8 tier. Same thing with the Crab Sword and Shield dual scissors. I think this is like a similar situation as the Tetranodon Sword and Shield. I do think this is probably going to be a little bit better. 320 attack, purple sharpness, 32 water, a 4-2 slot. The 4-2 slot's pretty solid. A level 3 rampage slot, but it just won't be as great an option as the 3 up top in A tier, unfortunately. Yeah, so, but it's not terrible, so it's not going to be any lower than B tier. The last Water Sword and Shield, which I didn't talk about in my Element Sword and Shield video, but if I were to make a video on it now, I would include it, is Amatsu's Sword and Shield. I kind of hate this weapon because I know that it's going to deal a ton of damage, especially because this thing has the Soakbind boost built into it, but it also has a lot of water as well. It's more than Midutsune's at the very least. Again, the problem is its negative affinity. It has negative 25 affinity and no slots. Right, and that's what makes this pretty uncomfortable and not as versatile. However, because I know like the damage potential of this thing, I just have to put it in A tier. I just have to, because it is a good sword and shield. But I just don't see it being in B tier, being the same tier as the Tigric Sword and Shield, which they are similar in stats, but this thing just has Silkline boost and element. So that's why it's an A tier. Right. Next element is Thunder. The first Thunder Sword and Shield is Zenogre's Oppressor's Bounty. Where is it? Here. Okay, so Oppressor's Bounty. It's one of the Sword and Shields I featured in the Sword and Shield, the Element Sword and Shield video. Very solid stats, right? 330 attack, 44 thunder, a little bit of purple sharpness. If this thing had like better slots, right? This thing only has 2 level 1 slots. If this thing had a little bit better slots, this could actually be like S tier. But I think the slots are kind of hold it back a little bit. But this is a very solid sword and shield to use. Same thing with the next one. Next one is Astalos' Rapier. Astalos Rapier. It's no possessive. Right, so right, 320 attack. So it's a little bit lower than Zogre's. Also has a little bit lower thunder damage. Right, this is just 39. But this thing does have 20% affinity, so it's a little bit easier to use. Right, it's going to be a little bit harder to build for attack boost using the Zenogre Sword and Shield compared to the Astalos Sword and Shield, simply because the Astalos Sword and Shield has 20% affinity. Actually, unless you like using mods and getting the exact charms and curious rolls you want, the Astalos Rapier actually will deal more like raw damage compared to Zenogre's, but it will still deal less element. But I do think Astalos Rapier is a very powerful option. This is my pick, and according to that survey I did one time, this is also your guys' pick, the majority of you guys. It is a very solid sword and shield. It's not S tier by any means, just because it doesn't have a lot of thunder damage, just 39, but it's very powerful. Next one is Dread Razor Plus. According to that survey I did, it's like none of you picked this weapon, but I think you're underestimating how good this weapon is. The main reason why it's an S tier is just because it has the most comfortable sharpness between like all the Thunder Sword and Shields in this game. Well, if you exclude the Benahara's Thunder Sword and Shield, but right, 330 attack, 49 Thunder, 15% affinity. Right, that makes this weapon pretty comfortable as well. And the slot's okay too. Right, it's a 2-1 slot, a level 2 rampage slot. It's not gonna deal as much damage as all the other A tier Thunder Sword and Shields, but it is very comfortable to use. It's definitely one I used like towards the beginning of the game. I do think this is a little bit underrated. Yeah, it's pretty solid. So I'm putting it in A tier. So I already mentioned this. This is the Sex Tray Yellow. So that's the Thunder Benahara Sword and Shield. Just like the Fire Benahara Sword and Shield. Right? They're all basically a sort of copy and paste of one another. They're like maybe off by a little bit, but right, just like the Fire variants, I think Sector Tray Yellow is also B tier. It's not going to deal as much damage, but it is pretty solid. I don't see it being anything below B tier, but it's also not A tier for me, so that's B tier. Okay, so next up is Cursed Rajan Club. That's this guy, which is going in C tier. You're not using this for thunder damage because its thunder damage is too low at 26. It has negative 10 affinity, so like I said before, negative affinity is kind of rough, even if it is negative 10. Does have a lot of attack at 360, but it's just white sharpness, I believe. Yeah. Its slots are okay. It's a level 3 slot with a level 2 rampage slot, but I just don't really see this weapon being very useful at all. So it's at C tier. Again, and at least has light sharpness, so it's not D or F. The next is the Furious Rajang Sword and Shield, Demon Lord Bludgeon. And this one I would actually put on A tier. The main reason is because it's very comfortable to use. Again, you're not using this as a Thunder Sword and Shield because its Thunder element is only 13, but you are using this for its raw damage. Right, 330 attack is pretty solid. Unfortunately, it does have an element, so when you start unlocking anomaly slots, right, it does sort of gimp the damage potential of this thing a little bit. Its slots are good too. 2 level 2 slots. The Rampage slots level 1 though. It's not the best, but again, I think Wirebug Wrangler sort of saves it a little bit. That's why it's in A tier. Not because it's the best like Thunder Sword and Shield, but just because right, it's a very versatile Sword and Shield overall. But it wouldn't be my pick though, but stat-wise, on paper, it is pretty good. That's why it's in A tier. Could probably be B tier, depending on who you talk to. But, for me, it's going to be sitting in A. Okay, and last up, we have Atomic Mind. So this Sword and Shield, I did talk about this Sword and Shield in the Elmont Sword and Shield video. However, I think I'm going to keep it on B tier. The reason is because it doesn't have the most comfortable sharpness out of between the other two, right? This only has 10 hits of purple, Once you max out once you max out the anomaly slots, you will get 30 hits of purple, but it is a little bit hard to justify using this for that, at least before you lock the 8th anomaly slot. It's really tough to use. You may be thinking, why don't you just use Protective Polish, but I just think Protective Polish is not good in this game. Especially because they buff Destroyer Oil in such a way that it restores sharpness. And that's just way better, in my opinion. It's just better to use Master's Touch and just reapply Destroyer Oil. It's way faster. The thing that kind of hurts this even more is that it has no slots. Again, I think I talked about this with something else, but even having level 1 decoration slots would help this a lot because you can add in Thunder Attack decorations. But this will deal the most Thunder damage out of all the Thunder Sword and Shields in this game. It's just that it's just really hard to justify using it, you know, when you're grinding your anomaly rank. So maybe once you unlock all the anomaly slots in this thing, it's probably a lot better, but right, it could be A tier. For me, I just think that's a little bit tough. That's a little bit hard for me to put in A tier, unfortunately. But do know that this thing does a lot of thunder damage, so it's definitely not C tier, but it's definitely like a high B or low A tier for me. A little bit of a controversial placement there, probably, if you talk to maybe like speedrunners or something, but for me at least, it's just not very comfortable to use. Moving on to the ice element. Oops. The first ice sword and shield is the Permafrost Edge, which is a very solid ice sword and shield, I think. Definitely an A tier. For me, very comfortable sharpness, has a lot of white sharpness, lots of ice attack too, 62 ice, 3 level 1 slots, which actually is very good for elemental sword and shields. Its attack stat's a little low, it's a 320 attack, which is kind of unfortunate. If it had 330, I almost would be S tier, but unfortunately its attack stat's pretty low. Which is why it wouldn't be an S tier, but pretty good choice for ice element. It wasn't my choice for ice elements, but this does have much better sharpness. It's probably more. It's probably better to use this like early endgame as opposed to late endgame when you have all the anomaly slots unlocked. Next we have the Lunagaran Sword and Shield, Winter's Feast Hatchet. It will also be A tier. It is pretty solid. It's 330 attack, decent chunk of purple. Doesn't have a lot of ice element though. It only has 26. And it has 2 level 1 slots. This slots could be a little bit better. But this can be more useful in like raw matchups, like raw heavy matchups. But there is a sword and shield to sort of obsolete this guy though. But on paper, this is a solid choice. That's why it's an A tier. Next we have Barioth Sword and Shield Never Event. This is Never Event. This is sort of like in a similar situation as the Nagakuko Sword and Shield. Even if it has high affinity, it has low attack. Unfortunately, it's at 300 attack. Also, its sharpness isn't that comfortable. It only comes with a base 10 hits of purple. And it has a level 1 Rampage slot, which, again, because they added Wirebug Wrangler, it's a little better, but still more useful to have the option for anti-species decorations, or Elembane as well. So I just don't recommend this weapon, although it can still be good, but I don't know. I put this in Z tier. Sort of in the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Chef's Knife. Really, this is the Gauss Hydraulic Sword and Shield. It's kind of in a similar situation as the Anjanat Sword and Shield. Very similar, just the problem is the negative affinity sort of hurts us a little bit as well. Same as the Anjanat Sword and Shield. But because it has a high attack, it can deal has potential to deal a lot of damage. So I can't really put this in. I don't think I really want to put this in C tier because I think it's just better than the Bromebreaker, Tabar, and the Pneumatic Drill Blade. So this will go on B tier. Okay. Also going on B tier is Secta Tray White. So Secta Tray White. Where is it? Here, I think. Again, just a similar situation as Secta Tray Red and Secta Tray Yellow. These are just all basically copy paste from one another, except for the green variant, which I'll talk about. The same thing, so B tier. Next we have Dora's Maelstrom. So this was my pick for the Ice Element Sword and Shield. Surprisingly, once you do end up upgrading this, curious crafting this, this will become better. This will do more damage than Permafrost Edge, although the sharpness is a little bit more uncomfortable in this guy compared to Permafrost Edge. Plus, it has like worse slots. This only has one level 1 slot, whereas Permafrost Edge has 3 level 1 slots. So this isn't as comfortable, but it does a little bit more damage. And this is still a very solid choice for Ice Elemental Sword and Shield, especially if you're fighting a monster that's leans more to elemental damage as opposed to raw damage. So same tier as Permafrost Edge, A tier. Finally, we have Velkhana Sword and Shield. This will be our second S tier. I didn't really include this in my Elemental Sword and Shield guide, but it really should have been there. Right, so there was a comment that sort of pointed this out too in that video. This definitely obsoletes the Lunagaran Sword and Shield because it just has a higher raw, has better slots, better rampage slots. It really obsoletes the Lunagaran Sword and Shield. It doesn't have a lot of ice damage. It's only at 24, but it doesn't really matter. You can still build this. You can still stack like all elemental damage on this thing. And it'll still be very, very powerful. And that's mainly because of its high raw stat of 340. So this is also a very strong Ice Elemental Sword and Shield as well. And it also will perform a little bit better on like raw matchups, like if you're fighting against Seething Battle Geese, for example. Seething Battle Geese has like a hit zone of like 90 or 95 or something like that. This will do a lot of damage. Plus, you can use this weapon for Frostcraft, and you'll get like a 20% faster recharge rates on your Frostcraft meter. So that's a pretty good benefit if you're using Frostcraft Sword and Shield using this weapon. So very good Sword and Shield. It's a definite S tier. And that's all the Ice Elemental Sword and Shields. Now we move on to Dragon Element. Starting with Malzeno's. So Malzeno's Sword and Shield is good on paper, right? I'm putting it in S tier. 3-3 attack, which is pretty solid. Decent chunk of purple. Doesn't do a lot of dragon damage, only at 34. Its slot is kind of decent. It has a level 4 slots. Its rampage slots could have been better. But again, level 1 rampage slots is okay because of Firebug Wrangler. So it's kind of saved there. So it's hard to put this on B tier because of that. So this is a solid weapon on paper. It will go on A tier for me. And next is what's added on the bonus update. Bonus updates added the Primordial Malzito Sword and Shield, the Silver Separator. This actually goes in A tier. Sorry, S tier. It does have a sort of a lower attack stat at 320, a little bit less purple sharpness than regular Malzito's Sword and Shield. But the real thing that sort of stands out in this guy is that slots. Just it's perfect. Right, 3 level 4 slots and a level 3 rampage slot is sort of insane, especially if you're at the later end game when you can have those like Challenger plus, Attack plus, Expert plus decorations. Right, that's where this weapon really shines. It basically just makes this the best Dragon Sword and Shield in the game because of that. Dethrones Valstrax's Sword and Shield after Valstrax's Sword and Shield's long reign as the best dragon element. This thing, it doesn't blow it out of the water, but it's definitely stronger than Valstrax's Sword and Shield now. So this is a definite S tier because of that. It's also because of its slots, it's also very versatile as well. You don't have to use this strictly as a dragon element's Sword and Shield. But it will be better that way if you use this using the dragon element. Okay, so the next Dragon Sword and Shield is actually Secretary Black. So this should be towards the end here. So again, all these elemental Banahabra Sword and Shields are just copy and paste of each other. Stat-wise, they're like off by a little bit, but right, they're just all gonna be B tier, right? Right, again, 330 attack, white sharpness, long white sharpness, decent dragon damage, good slots, 421, level 3 rampage slot. Not the best, but not the worst either, so they're all B tier. Okay, now for the Magalas, starting with Gore Magala. Gore Magala Sword and Shield is also it's also a solid choice for Dragon. It's 320 attack, a little bit of purple sharpness, 28 Dragon, so it's not the most, but this does come with 15% affinity, level 2 slots, level 2 rampage slots, so this will do a decent amount of damage because of that. That's why it's going in A tier, at least for me. The next Magala is Shagaru Magala. This weapon has the lowest attack value out of all the Sword and Shields at 290, so that kind of already puts this pretty low. This have 35% affinity, 43 dragon is pretty solid, purple sharpness. The rampage slot is not that great, it's only level 1 and it has no slots. As I talked about before, it's very helpful to have at least level 1 slots when you're dealing with elemental Sword and Shield. So, again, similar situation with the Nagakuko Sword and Shield and the Burial Sword and Shield. Right, high affinity, low attack weapon sort of kills its damage potential. So it's going in C tier. The last Magala, which is Chaotic Gore Magala, which this is going to be also very controversial. I'm putting this in B tier. On paper, this is very good. Oh, maybe not on paper, but if you use like Berserk and Bloodlust and stuff like that, this weapon can be pretty good. Right? 340 attack, decent chunk of white, 45 dragon. Right? Once you clear yourself of the frenzy, you get a ton of affinity from this thing. Right? So you don't really have to build for critical or anything like that. But again, I personally think Bloodlust is very overrated, and it's not very comfortable to use. Right? I've used it before. I just don't think Bloodlust is very good, or it is good theoretically, but I just don't think casually people should be using Bloodlust to give yourself affinity when there's just better and safer options. Berserk isn't that great either. Right when it came out, well, Berserk is something completely different. I don't want to talk about Berserk, but I just think Berserk is also very overrated. So even though this can be very good, I just you need Bloodlust if you want this to work on everything besides the Megalas. So that's why it's going on B tier. Okay. Next is Ibushi. This is Wind Chaser. I would say if if they didn't made the changes to curious curious weapon crafting, this would be probably like A tier. But I'm putting this in B tier. Right, so this is like the Destroyer Oil Grinder S weapon of choice back then, but because of this thing has an element. It doesn't have a lot of dragon either. It's only 21 dragon. Right, you really want more or a higher attack stat, and because of the way Curious Crafting works, unlocking more anomaly slots will also increase your elements. Whereas with status and raw sword and shields, it will just increase attack, which is really what you want from this thing. Unfortunately, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to get more dragon damage instead of more raw, which is not what you want. So because of that, I'm knocking it down on B tier. Really, this thing is only used as Grinder S. It can be powerful still, but that's really about it. You're not really using this thing for anything else. Okay. Okay. Fastrack Sword and Shield. This is also an S tier weapon. Right, this will always be a good sword and shield. Right, this is always been a good sword and shield. Even when Sunbreak first came out, right, people recommend this thing because right, it has a lot of white sharpness, like 140 out of the box. It has a good attack set at 340, level 3 slot, level 2 rampage slot. So even if this thing does have dragon elements, this thing's still very strong against every monster in the game, so it's very versatile. A little less so because of the curious crafting and the way it works, but right, that makes this thing more of a elemental weapon as opposed to, you know, just use against all the monsters weapon. But this is still a very strong option for dragon compared to the silver separator. Right, very solid sword and shield. Gates of Heaven. Last for the dragon sword and shield, we have, where is it? Abyssal Sunburst. Yes. So this is Gaius Magorm Sword and Shield. Really, Gaius Magorm didn't really get much attention after uh, Sunbreak, but uh, this is not like a terrible Sword and Shield. 350 attack, a big chunk of purple. Again, the thing that hurts this, right? This is kind of in a similar situation as right, Chef's Knife and Anjanath Sword and Shield. Right, just negative affinity kind of kills this thing. It's not better than Amazu Sword and Shield because this thing doesn't have the Silkbind boost bonus to it. And also this thing only does like 18 dragon damage, so you're not really using this for dragon elements, but also the other thing is you're not using this really for raw damage either because of the way Curious Crafting works. So kind of an unfortunate thing for this guy, but it's still pretty strong. Still not a strong option overall. That's why I'm putting this in B tier. Right. That is all the elemental sword and shields in this game. As you can see, not many status sword and shields. If you exclude the Flaming Espionage sword and shield. But yeah. Now we're moving on to status. Starting with poison. Our first poison sword and shield is a Lucent Narcocuda sword and shield. Effect is Asterism. And this thing's definitely going in S tier. If you ask me, Skydy 5, I just want to craft one sword and shield. Right? I just want to try it out. I'm a dual blades main, but I just want to make one sword and shield because I'm lazy. I don't want to have to craft 5 sword and shields and Curious Craft those to the max. What's the one sword and shield you would recommend? And I would say Lucent Narcocuda sword and shield. So 340 attack, very powerful. Purple sharpness, only does 11 poison, so you're not really using this as a poison sword and shield, but you will inflict some poison. The slots are good, same thing as the Fine Kimura sword and shield. It's a 4-2 slot. The rampage slot is a level 1 though, which again, it's not as bad now because of Widebug Wrangler. But also you have the option to upgrade it. And because the attack set of this weapon is a little bit higher, it really doesn't matter too much if you want to choose to upgrade it or not, the rampage slot. A very good sword and shield overall. This is one of the sword and shields that obsoletes the Fine Kimura sword and shield that I was talking about, way in the beginning. This is my pick. Very, very versatile sword and shield. Right, again, if you ask me what's the one sword and shield you would craft, if you had to only craft one, it would be this guy here. Probably the best sword and shield overall. So next up is, for poison, is Dirty Graph, which will put in A tier. So it's, again, this thing sort of obsoletes the Elite Dagger. Right, this has the same raw, better slots, and this thing has a whopping 42 poison, which is, I believe, the most out of all the poison sword and shields. Yes, so 42 poison is the most. This is a solid sword and shield because it's raw. It's at 350. So even though this thing doesn't have purple sharpness, this is still pretty solid. It'll still do a lot of damage. I used this weapon at the very beginning of Sunbreak a lot because I didn't really want to use Valstrax Sword and Shield. 30 Graph is a very solid weapon. Still very powerful now, so I put it in A tier. Likewise, I'll put the Puki Sword and Shield, the Datura Splitter Plus. I'll put this in A tier as well. So this is 320 attack, 36 poison, but it has purple sharpness, which is why this is also not like a terrible sword and shield either. Yeah, and its slots is very good. It's a level 3 and level 2 slots and a level 3 rampage slot, so you got a lot of versatility there. So on paper, this is a very solid weapon to use, as well as 30 Graph, but I do think 30 Graph is just slightly better though. The Tour Splitter could be B tier or A tier, but I do think there's a weapon that's worse than the Tour Splitter, but it's not that bad. That's why I'm putting Poogie Sword and Shield up top in A tier. It is a solid weapon that you can use. So that weapon I'm talking about is Empress's Rapier. In a base rise, this was like the best sword and shield in the game, but and Sunbreak, the Rathian sword and shield is kind of like meh. So it's 330 attack, which is solid. 31 poison, 10% affinity. This thing never gets a slot, which sucks for raw sword and shields. Okay, I'm saying raw sword and shield because right, this thing doesn't deal elemental damage. It does status damage, but really using us as a raw in terms of like raw damage, but the statuses are sort of like a bonus. But yeah, very awkward because particularly because of its sharpness. Right, you need some handicraft, and even if you curious craft this thing to the max and you unlock all the anomaly slots, you'll still only get 20 purple, which is like you can work with it, but it's just a little bit awkward to use. Can't really recommend this guy too much, but it's still solid. So I'm putting it in B tier. Now this one is probably also kind of controversial. So this is Lunatic Rose. I'm putting this in S tier. This could be A tier, but as far as like versatility goes, I do think the Lunatic Rose is a little bit more versatile than the Lucent Agricuda Sword and Shield. Simply because this guy, Lunatic Rose, has a built-in 30% affinity. So you just need 1 critical eye, 5 agitator, and 3 weakness exploits, and this thing's already got 100% affinity. And then you can go to town with attack boost. You can use guard sword and shield with this, healer builds, some other gimmicky stuff like status trigger build-up boost builds. This using Lunatic Rose is gonna be much easier for that kind of stuff as opposed to Lucent Argakugas. This thing also has like triple the poison damage to Lucent Argakugas. So this thing deals 33 poison, which is pretty good. It's the same as the Flaming Espinases. The thing that kind of sucks about this guy is its raw is a little bit low. It only has an attack set at 320. So it's not going to do a lot of damage, unfortunately. But again, this is probably the most versatile sword and shield in the game. It's a Lunatic Rose. Again, it could be A tier. I could downgrade it to A tier. I can understand that, but for me personally, I do think this is a very good choice. As far as like if you had to craft one sword and shield, what would you craft? This one's also a good choice as well. A good runner-up, I'd say. That's all the poison sword and shields, I suppose. Right, we only have a few left. Next status, or I guess statuses, are Paralysis and Sleep. So Paralysis, we have Secta Tray Green. The problem with... See, I have a problem with status sword and shields, especially Paralysis and Sleep, because my main issue is that to try to balance this stuff, they like really gimp the damage of these things. This thing only has 320 attack, 24 paralysis, white sharpness, no affinity, no level 2 slots, which would have been nice because you can then use paralysis attack and that kind of stuff. But yeah, they really, even in this game, they just sort of like nerf the damage of all these like paralysis and sleep weapons, especially paralysis. I guess they really just don't want you to, paralysis lock the monsters. Even though like the late anomaly like monsters like almost never get paralyzed. Right? They get just so much resistance that I don't know why they do that. But yeah, it's just tough to recommend paralysis and sleep Sword and Shields. Right? It's all random unless you have status trigger. But if you have status trigger, um, you're playing close to the fire. That playstyle. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to justify putting this anything above C tier. Really, right? It's RNG. You can't control when the monster gets paralyzed. Monsters gets paralyzed. Maybe you're like get blown off at the wrong timing, and then you can't even take advantage of it. Same thing with sleep. Sleep is the same way, right? Sometimes it's at random, especially when you're playing sleep in multiplayer. Right? You put the monster to sleep, but then some idiot with the light bowgun, fires a little pew 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 pierce ammo, and then the monster wakes up. What was the point of sleeping a monster? So it's hard. So, but that's not to say these aren't like terrible weapons either. At least these weapons have like white sharpness. So I'll get like this is called, what is this called? Cat-like tread. So cat-like tread at least has like white sharpness, even though its raw is at 300. This has higher paralysis damage than Sector Tray Green, so this is at 35. It's a level 3 slots, but this rampage slot's only level 1. Again, level 1 rampage slots aren't bad because of Wide Bug Wrangler, but you don't have the option for anti-species decorations. But again, the damage is much lower. It's hard to justify like the like 1 or 2 paralysis or 3 paralysis you might get. Does that make up the amount of damage you lose? And it's probably not, in my opinion. Paralysis might be a little better in multiplayer, but still, it's random, and it gets pretty hard to inflict statuses in anomaly quests. So likewise with sleep, there are 3 sleep weapons. We have what is this? This is Karma Knight. Right. If you want to inflict the most sleep, I think you want to choose this one because this is 32 sleep. If you want to deal the most raw damage, you pick Dream Waver. I keep calling this Dream Weaver, but this is called Dream Waver. So this is Dream Waver. If you want to do the most damage, but a little bit less sleep, then you pick Dream Waver. And if you want to pick a dumb weapon, you pick the Antique Machina SS, which has the most raw because of purple sharpness, but it doesn't deal a lot of sleep. And it has no slots, and it has a level 1 rampage slot, so it's it's a cool looking sword and shield, but stat wise, it's like, I don't know why you would use this. Really, any of the Antique Machina weapons aren't that great. But again, statuses just really isn't that powerful in this game, but that doesn't mean these aren't like terrible sword and shields. At least these all have white sharpness or purple sharpness, so it's gonna deal more damage than any of the blue sharpnesses down here at DNF. Right, that's why they're in DNF, because of blue sharpness. If you haven't noticing it already. Okay. Last up, we have Blast. 3 Blast Sword and Shields. We'll start with Blood Orange Bishatin. So I'm putting this in B tier. It has 320 raw, so it's not like the most raw. This will deal the most blast damage at 50. And its slots are okay. It's a level 4 slot and a level 3 rampage slot. I just don't think this does enough damage to justify the blast damage. Blast isn't as impressive as poison, especially in this game. And Iceborne Blast was really good because each blast proc did 300, but in this game it only does 200. So it's not really that great, but it's still pretty solid, I'd say. Not a terrible choice. A good choice for Blast Sword and Shield is Spirit Stealer. So this is the scored Magnamalo Sword and Shield, and this is the final S tier weapon here. So again, if you ask me the question, Guidey 5, I just want to craft 1 Sword and Shield because I'm a longsword main. I'm a filthy longsword main. I want to try Sword and Shield because it's a better weapon than longsword. What's the 1 Sword and Shield I want to craft? Because I just don't feel like, crafting 5 elemental Sword and Shields and, curious weapon crafting them to the max. I just want 1 Sword and Shield. I'd pick Spirit Stealer is also going to be amongst like these 3 choices. Vectus Asterism, Lunatic Rose, Spirit Stealer. They're all like very, very highly versatile weapons. You can use this on like these 3 on any monster. Spirit Stealer also obsoletes the Kumura Sword and Shield because its stats are very similar, right? So 3/3 attack, purple sharpness. It's gonna do the least blast damage between the 3 blast Sword and Shields, but that doesn't really matter too much. Its slots are slightly worse than Kumura Sword and Shield. It's only a 3/2 compared to Kumura Sword and Shield's 4/2. But that's really about it. That's the only difference there. So, right, the blast damage sort of sets it apart from Kumura's Sword and Shield. It gives it just a little bit more of an edge. So, definitely a good Sword and Shield to use here. Okay, last up, but not least, we have Teosha's Metal. And this I'll also put in B tier. This could be an A tier weapon too, but the reason why it's not A tier is because it has no slots. Right? So for raw Sword and Shields, you really want level 2 slots, but this just doesn't have any to begin with. It has decent attack stat of 340, but it doesn't get purple until you have Handicraft level 1 or until you unlock the 8th and 10th anomaly slots. When you unlock the 10th anomaly slot, this thing gets 20 purple. So it can do a decent damage, but I'd still think like Spirit Stealer is just going to be way better because it already has purple sharpness to begin with, and it has just pretty good slots as well. So, I mean, this could be an A tier weapon, but I just don't really recommend this too much. But it's still solid, I'd say. So I'm putting this in B tier. And you know what? I think I finished earlier than I anticipated. So it is all 64 Sword and Shields. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, so again, as I talked about in the very beginning, these Sword and Shields are very well balanced in this game. So even if a weapon's in like B or C tier, and you don't agree with it, maybe I insulted you with something, I attacked you by putting something in B tier, it's still a good weapon in this game. Right, just by the way they balanced all these weapons. Right, I do really appreciate that. Right, in previous games there are just Sword and Shields in previous games there are Sword and Shields that are just like so bad. Like if you go back to like base Rise, like some of those like final upgrade Sword and Shields are just so weak. Like why would I ever use it? Ever. I think this is like the first game where like there's just so many options. It's crazy. So again, like even like some of the C tier Sword and Shields, like those have like big damage potentials. It can be like pretty useful in like certain situations. Yeah, I really do appreciate that from uh developers for Sunbreak. And that's also true for like the other weapons as well. At least from what I've been just like when I quickly browse through all the weapons, they're very balanced. I like the Roggy a lot though, so I would put it up. Yeah, yeah, the Roggy Sword and Shield is pretty solid too. I can definitely put it in S tier. I'm gonna be a little bit stubborn though because this is my tier list, so it's gonna be an A tier. Yeah, so this is again anything from like C tier and above. They are very viable options, even in like late endgame as well. Um, yeah, and again, this tier list was based on stats, right? Power, comfort, and versatility, and not like how they look. So, if you're wondering like why is Ninja Master Sword in F tier, it's because of that. Right? The Bichuten and Isuchi Raw are much worse than Roggy, so I don't know if I put them in the same category. Yeah, you make a good point. The thing is, like, the difference between the Ragi and the Bichuten and Izuchi is because Bichuten and Izuchi has purple. Or at least they have potential to get purple. The Ragi Sword and Shield doesn't get purple. Even with any handicraft or curious crafting stuff. So I can put them on the same tier. Yeah. Originally I had Izuchi and B, but then like I like changed my mind. I changed my mind last minute. Layered weapon ranking XD. um, Probably not. um, I don't really layer my weapons because I don't like layered weapons that much because I like want the damage type to like match the weapon itself. So usually instead of layered weapons, I like to just find like a layered armor that like fits the weapon I'm using. I like that a little bit better. Ragi goes to 410 power and decent poison stat. Yeah, very powerful. Such an ugly sword and shield, but it's so good. Yeah, it's also very big too. Like if you like carrying this around, it's like huge compared to like the other sword and shields. Yeah, it's not the prettiest sword and shield. Yeah, I think most people really enjoy like the Ninja Master Sword, like the simple look. They also like punching monsters to death. Furious Rajang is yeah, both Rajang weapons are pretty big too. Yeah, the Rajang and then Furious Rajang. I think Furious Rajang is bigger because it has like the fur pointing out. I'm trying to think of what else is like big. I think Dreamweaver is like big. Dreamweaver is also very ugly. That's hideous. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do like a I mean, I said this isn't based on like design because it's subjective, but it could. I don't think I'm gonna do. I could do it, but I don't think I'm gonna do like one based on design because like I don't like I'm not like that strong into design that much. I don't layer my weapons. Yeah, they are both cool sword and shields. Cool looking. Iron Golem was also like pretty large sword and shield. Yeah, kind of a shame that some of the cooler looking ones are like really weak. Like the antique machina sword and shields are like really weak. Or really all the antique machina weapons are really weak. I do like the rapier sounds. How many rapier types do we have? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. I will say I do like the design of like Lunatic Rose and Empress Rapier. That's what I use in the my profile picture. I use the Empress Rapier. Lance is pretty much the same as SNS. The tier would look very similar. Yeah. I mean, I've actually been trying to use Lance because I know like there's like 2 Lance players in the world. I'm like, I might as well just be the third one, right?